it is hard to grow, and we don't, frankly, I don't think we value it, not as a culture necessarily, maybe never in history, in pockets probably, but because it is a hard task. I'm older now, quite a bit, and I find myself thinking that every now and then I think I should have arrived by now. I should finally get a diploma. Somebody should mark out that I've achieved something, right?
Yeah.
Well, my age is not something I can do anything about, so it's not my fault. And then we just moved a couple years ago, a major move for us from living in a suburban big cities to a rural area. We're off the grid so much we don't have cell service where we live.
Yeah. Which, fun fact, you and I have that in common in that we are both from Colorado, and we have a strong affinity for the mountains.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But now you're somewhere in a canyon, people can't find you.
Right, right. Well, you know, I was telling somebody today, I'm 40 minutes from the nearest store, right? So you have to plan differently, you have to think different. So I'm in the midst of transition, which I've taught other people about for a long time, and that's great, but I have to take my own medicine, and I keep thinking it'll go away, and it doesn't go away fast. Transition takes a long time. Change, not so much. You can change a whole lot in a hurry, but the actual transitional part of it takes a long time, and so I'm right in the middle.
Like meddle on that a little bit, like create that distinction between transition and change.
Well, we changed. Our actual move took 2 days, maybe, and 3 trucks and lots of people, and it was done, right? And so we moved all our stuff, and you know, it actually took our life from a city to the mountains.
Yeah. Minnesota to Indiana.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And but then the transition starts.
Yeah.
And I think the transition is the upsetting part. It's the tumultuous part. Where did I put this, and in what box is that, and that kind of simple stuff maybe. But then pretty soon after you've been there a couple of years, you think, well, maybe this should be less, and it doesn't get less. It winds up continuing, right? But the point I want to try to make is, when all is said and done, I'm amazed at how strong the learning curve is in this process. It should be easier, or maybe I should be able to pay for more of it, and I did pay for some of this move. This first move I've ever had paid for extra help, and I was grateful I could, and grateful for it. But the point is, you can't exclude yourself from the transitional process. It's just simply a process that you have to go through. And I think we don't want to take that time. So we shortcut that process. And when you do, you shortcut your development, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So I have to stay open and lean into it and say, I don't like this. This isn't as much fun as I want it to be. I wish it was over in some ways. Yeah. But every piece of it that I lean into, I learn about. I learn about me. I learn about my relationships, and it just keeps getting richer if I'll let it.
Yeah. Well, I love that distinction between transition and change. And from your perspective, would you say the majority of people don't transition well? Yes,
and I would say change is an ongoing process.
And it's inevitable.
Right, and concomitant with all change comes grief. Now, we don't usually identify it because a lot of change is upward mobile or acquiring new things or that kind of thing. Some change is, of course, heinous, like having cancer or some such thing. But a lot of change is something that we anticipate going forward. So we don't think of it as needing grief to attach to it. Yeah. So part of transition is letting go of things that you're not going to need on this part of the trip. I call it offloading the outworn, but that's just my phrase. And what it means to me is it's like in Scripture, it talks about wheat's development. It takes chaff for wheat to fully develop, but at the end of the wheat's development, chaff is worthless. But it's necessary for the growth of the wheat. So if I don't offload that, then I'm carrying all the chaff along with me. And I think what transition is for me to begin to grind finer this change that I'm going through.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to a friend of mine who's child is getting ready to go to college, and she's grieving the loss of this child and afraid for him and doesn't really want him to leave. And I said, you've worked your whole life to launch this kid. Why aren't you celebrating? Well, that's transitional process to learn how to celebrate that movement rather than to hang on to it. And pretty soon I think we're dragging copious amounts of outworn stuff that's no longer necessary. It was necessary to keep the kid out of the street at this point, but you don't have to control his life at this point. You should celebrate him, and you should try to put yourself in his place and say, what would I want my parents to do as they launched me? You know, go. Life can't but hurt you, but it's okay. I'll still be here. You know, take the risk. Go for it in some way. So transition is to help us not accumulate a bunch of past that's no longer useful. So you said just a minute ago, I wasn't caught up in circumstance and situation. The reason is because it's not the circumstance or the situation that's the key, it's what you think it means and how it impacted you and what you saw of it. So I'm interested in how you process that inside. Well, transition work is the process of this developmental challenge.